Villeneuve. If you need to watch Sicario, or I don't know if you saw Arrival, or Blade Runner 2049. He is a fantastic director because he is more takes his big stories, but he makes you focus, and it's all about, you know, a normal person and making one decision, and that decision spirals this way or that way. And like, just from their perspective, so it's a very intimate, in a complex world. Like Sicario, it's just them driving through Mexico, but it's the most intense thing in the world. And he just does this great organic way, and it's very neat. And so this dude stuff is this huge story, and you're in the main character. You're always with him. He's always in a shot, or kind of thing. And so it's a great way to do that story, because a lot of the stuff he doesn't explain it. It's not, well, my audience is stupid, I have to explain all this stuff. It's like, no, they throw you in. It's like, oh, well, this is how this universe works. Okay. And he makes it to where it's just recognizable enough, but you can fill in the gaps, but you always have questions, but it just keeps going. It just throws you in the middle of it. It treats you like a smart person. But the music is like integral, like it's another character. Like it's giving you exposition instead of like just in that giant crawl of text or any of that kind of stuff. It's like you see a thing or you hear a thing, and that is explaining it, but in the super fast way, like where you just kind of gets into your brain rather than text, verbal.
Right.
And
well, that's interesting.
It's so cool. And as a music lover, you'll be like, I didn't know this was possible with the human brain and sounds. I didn't.
Well, you've intrigued me. I'll try to find a showing that's at 9:00 in the morning or something. So
something like that. Yeah.
So I can avoid the crowd. That's one of the things about the big movies that I don't like.
Oh yeah.
I go to see them, and I'm so distraught by the people, doing all the crap people do in theaters that makes the experience unpleasant. But
there are some that are like audience participation movies where you're supposed to laugh and cry and whatever, and like it's because everybody's doing that around you. There's some of those, like, and that's sure. This is not one of those. This is an immersive shut the fuck up.
Well, I hope people do. Never pass up an opportunity to shut the fuck up.
Right. Oh, but the story itself gets me thinking of it's all about mistrusting authority or questioning authority, not mistrusting, but always question. And like authority is people and government is people, and they're making human decisions, and how good people can do bad things and that kind of stuff. And it's just kind of really, how do you find yourself and how do you question things within a controlled environment kind of thing. Like a lot of things we do, it's because of the influence. A lot of things we do is because of the influence of society. It's not our decision kind of thing. We do a lot of things in response to stuff or because we've been bred into it kind of stuff. Like a lot of our agency is not our agency when you really break it down, and it scares the hell out of people first. But it's also that huge kind of where you're going of like, it's that huge question of how do I make my decisions myself when I am not only a part of a grand society, but also influenced by every society prior. I'm riding the wave of humanity. I am not an individual all the time.
Well, I would couple that with something that has been, I guess, bothering me for a number of years. And there's a long backstory on this, but essentially you're in a relativistic world where, okay, my behavior may be in response to certain things in the environment, but my response affects the environment.
Right.
So if I'm in a crowd, to stretch our example, if I'm in a crowded theater and somebody behind me is talking, and my response is to stand up and tell them to shut up, Well, I've affected everybody in the theater much more
Right.
profoundly than that person did. So it's, what, or, conversely, if I don't respond, so I sometimes enable people.
Yeah,
Somebody
yeah.
says something outlandish and you just go, and they assume you're in agreement with them. So you can't isolate yourself from, you can't escape your own corpus.
Right, right, right.
You are part of the environment, and it's that kind of thinking, I think, is foreign to a lot of people. That's why we have such difficulty in expressing the emergency of climate change, because people don't see themselves as being part of the climate. The
Right.
climate's out there and I'm here, and I'm not doing anything to affect it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're breathing, you're eating, you're
Yeah.
moving, you're doing all those things. You are part of the environment. So yeah,
Yeah.
I don't, I'm not comforted by my conclusion.
By humans' limitations. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really, it really concerns me that there doesn't seem to be an amicable solution that's imminent somehow. That all we have to do is get to the right, elect the right person, do the right thing, and everything will be okay. I don't think
It's
I don't think
it's
that
hard to see. It's hard to see. And the other thing that keeps going through my mind is getting to terms with it's impossible to see.
yeah,
Like these ideas of like there are things bigger than your human brain can comprehend, just
yeah,
in reality, just that you're aware of that you can't really comprehend, like
right,
infinity and the universe and blah, blah, blah,
right.
and billions of years and you
and
know
and the computer and how Zoom works, and
right,
the
all that
basic
stuff. Like,
things you do every day. Yeah,
and our human brain, it evolves to take shortcuts and to judge and to stereotype, and like we have to compartmentalize.
right.
Because remember the old story that it's like, okay, I could think about the lion charging at me and what its motivations are and how it plays within the desert. Nope, nope. The brain that says, "Oh, lion, forget everything else, run. You
Yeah,
live."
yeah.
So
Well,
I was watching this thing on the start of civilizations. I love those proto history, or I forgot, but it's kind of like hunter gatherers. You didn't have really nothing stayed with you. You didn't have all the roles or whatever. You had a leader, but the leader was a very actionable kind of thing. And so that leader dies, the next strong person jumps up. When you got into a city, you stayed there and you had more people. And so they had to figure out how to live together. Because in a hunter gatherer, you didn't have to figure that out. It was a smaller group. You had a very easy, simple structure. But in the society, you've got everybody has different roles, and some people get, this is the birth of inequality of some people are going to get more and some people are going to get less because of specialization and all these things. But they devised, I find it fascinating. They had devised the first government. They devised the first religion. They devised the first social kind of thing, all your social mores and stuff. Mm-hmm. And like, this is new. Living in a group is new. How do I deal with other people? It's fascinating. And that leads me to, I'll wrap it up. Today we live in a society, but we're separated. It's like all the rules that worked for interpersonal relationships now are applying, like even in my own life, applying less. Like I'm not in a room with someone else very often. This is different. Right. How does this work? Like we were primed to do a certain way and we learned all the socializations a certain way. Is there a new socialization that's going to be learned?
Yeah, well, that's going back to what I was saying before about being part of the environment you're in. You are of the environment, not in the environment. And that you can't make a decision that doesn't have a ripple effect in the environment. You think of the butterfly effect, if you want. Yeah. Everything has some kind of reaction. There is going to be some effect. So you can't make decisions based on how things were when you made the decision, because you decide, and your decision itself, it's like the very, this was one thing that puzzled me when physicists started talking about existence and non-existence, and they said, well, it is possible for something to both exist and not exist at the same time. Now that's crazy. But as the explanation evolves, that is your observation
Right.
that affects it. So in the same way, your observation of the society may affect your decision, but your decision affects the society so that it's no longer the same. It's like you throw a rock in the water and the ripples are no longer the same as they were, and you can't take it back. So I think there are a lot of folks, Make America Great Again is all about trying to make a decision today about the way things were, or at least the way you perceived them to be in the past. Yeah. So in the past, white people had privilege, and now looks like we're losing that. So let's go back to that. In the past, I had a 8 to 5 job, and I made enough to buy a house and a boat and all that stuff. So let's go back to that. Well, no, there are things that have occurred.
Right.
For instance, global economy. There are things that have occurred that enable you to go to Walmart and buy cheap stuff, but that's affected the job you have.
Right.
You can't buy cheap Chinese crap and not affect the factory down the street or the store on Main Street. Everything has a connection. And I think that's one of the things that's very difficult to explain to people. They can't grasp it. They can't understand.
Well, it's complex. It's a snapshot of the entirety of reality, and that's a bit much for
right.
people.
Well, it is, and because we don't demand it of them. What you were saying before about people wanting, an answer. We want something. I've forgotten how you were phrasing it, but you were saying we want something specific. I can't deal with all the complexity. That's my chief criticism of religions, especially the Catholic Church, that I see that there is some truth hidden away in all of that, but they've opted for the simplistic narrative rather than compelling people to have a more or a higher level of thought and or even belief. Elevate this to a higher level so that you're not telling people that the world was created in 7 days or 6 days. You're telling them in the past, people didn't have any kind of scientific framework, so they attempted to explain things. And here's the way they explained it. Now let's explain it today in terms of what we have.
Yeah. In that example, I'd be like, well, it was created in 7 means the perfect amount of time. We're talking about the perfect amount of God time, which for you is a lifetime. For God, it's 3 billion years is nothing.
Right.
Kind of like that. Yeah.
But there's the lack of the demand for education that, we view education as a commodity that I get mine and then I forget about it. I got my degree now. I quit doing all that stuff. I study philosophy. I had to take a philosophy course in college, but why should I study it now? Well, why just study it?
Most education is worthless. It's about learning a factory system or getting a piece of paper.
It's not inherently worthless.
No, oh God, no. God,
it has evolved to a point where, and that's really is the issue. And I won't repeat all the stuff about the miracles of Jesus and all. My argument about that you explain the loaves and fishes in a way that doesn't demand magic. There's a way of gaining an explanation that can be sensible. Immanuel Kant writes about religion within the realm of reason. The religion doesn't.
I think it's even more powerful.
Well, it doesn't have to be unreasonable. But the people who were going back to those first hunter-gatherers who formed a civilization, when they created a religion, what they were saying made sense to people. Now, it wasn't scientifically accurate, but as far as they were able to perceive, it was as close to the literal truth as they could come up with. In other words, they weren't making up a fable. They were trying to explain what they
They're
observed,
trying to explain it. Yeah.
what they experienced. Well, if
Now
you
this,
quit doing that, excuse me, but if you quit doing that and you say, well, we're going to stick with the explanation we had in 1900. Well, I'm sorry, the river.
then it becomes dogma. Yeah.
Well, you can't step in the same
Yeah.
river twice. It changes. So
I like that.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
You can't step in the same river twice. Right. Well, that was this other thing when I go on the other extreme. Now, of course, I'm an absurdist, so there is no answer kind of thing. It's the nothing matters, and that's not a negative. The school of absurdity.
Nothing matters, and who cares?
right. Like, just enjoy the ride, man. Enjoy the ride. You're never gonna figure it out. Just have fun with it. It's this idea of when we start getting into the abstract, and this is what a lot of people will label academic style thinking. And there is, it's wonderful, but it has flaws too. Everything has flaws. Where you get into this abstract version, and one, it's less connected with kind of understanding as today. Like if you're in the church audience, it has to be relevant to me today, and it has to be relevant to me. It can't be, oh, I'll get that after I go study for a couple of years. No, it has to be relevant for me right now. And you get this academic and abstract version, and it goes so far up where it's in your head, so it's going to be affected by your own idealism, right? And it starts being idealistic and romantic, and kind of it starts changing. And it's still incredibly important to understand, to have more knowledge about it. It has to have a deeper connection to something, deeper understanding of something. But it also removes you from a more organic understanding of it. I don't know how to describe it. I could do it more. Of course, if we watch Dune, it was like the masculine knowledge understanding versus the female intuitive understanding. And these are all poor concepts, but just something that popped in my head. But it's this, you need kind of both. Like I want a rigid knowledge understanding. I want a removed abstract understanding, but I also want an intimate interpersonal understanding, interpersonal between two people and between me and my inner self. And like, it has to fit all the buckets.
Yeah.
And when we go off too far on, I'll just say it's always been called the masculine. It's such a poor phrasing on one way. Well, what's the other way? I guess the other way is, live in the moment. I don't know what is the non-academic, abstract, heady theory in terms of when we were talking about wisdom or whatever, of like, let me figure out everything, come up with this answer. What's the other style? Or at least an other style. I know there's probably a million, but like, do you get what I'm talking about? The academic way of thinking, the abstract way of thinking.
Dogmatic as opposed to existentialism? Is that the...
Yeah, kind of dogmatic or existentialist, right? What is the another way of looking at it that is far from existential? I don't want to say the opposite of existential, but I guess I do.
Well, I mean, to me, existential means, observational. It's what you can experience and what you can prove, at least to yourself, that it's not based on a given set of, dogma or principles. It's what you observe yourself in reality. Okay. And it becomes a very personal thing. But we all have it, and each of ours has something in common. It's not like there's one thing that rules. It's just, it's like the average human being is 5'8". Well, nobody dictated it that way. That's just the way it is, and it may increase or decrease, but that's in terms of real existence, this is it. Rather than saying human beings must be 5'8". Right. That is.
Oh, so is it existentialism in a balance might be I had it. social consciousness.
Hmm. Well, yeah. I don't know. The semantics of this can be confusing to me.
Oh, it's to me too.
But I think the notion of your personal experience. We talked about this when we were discussing belief. Your personal experience. That I believe that cold weather is good for my sinuses. Well, you believe that. Why? Well, I experienced it. So it may or may not be true, but I believe it because I experienced it, as opposed to somebody telling me that cold weather is good for my sinuses. Am I going out and freezing to death in order to quit sneezing? I'm relying on my own observation rather than the dictates or the dogma of somebody else. But I think I think we're onto something that is critical, and it's what you were saying before about these arguments going over people's heads. I think that's the real crisis here, is that I'm not that smart. There are a lot of people a lot smarter than I am, but I aspire to be smarter than I am. I aspire to have more knowledge and hopefully more wisdom than I possess. That's what I desire. That's what I want to have. There is another force at work here that says, no, I already know everything I need to know. Don't tell me anything.
Ego.
Because you're feeding me a lot of crap and you're trying to take advantage of me. I'm not going to listen to anything. I don't want to hear the experts. I don't want to know that. And that's where I think the real crisis is, that if you question the experts based on your own personal experience, that's perfectly valid. But if you reject the experts based on your prejudice and closed-mindedness, then you're simply drawing a line in the sand, and the sand is shifting away from you.
Well said. Yeah, there's this idea of bringing the explanation and that kind of knowledge down to a more, not simplified, but I want to say more organic, approachable way, and raising, so you bring it down and then you raise everybody else's faculties. Basically, they're given all the tools to go up. So you like meeting in the middle is what I like, and that just feels balanced, as opposed to focusing on one or the other, like dumbing it down or smartening them up, like that.
No.
That feels very disresonant, or whatever the word is.
Well, that's in a political sense, trying to hang on to your position position that gives you some advantage, maybe reelects you or gets you money or whatever it does, but holding on to that position in spite of other perspectives and other evidence that may cause you to alter your position. That's where the problem is. I heard a politician on the morning talk shows today talking about how it used to be in the U.S. Senate that you had people working together because they had this sense that they needed to pass some bills that were in the best interest of the majority of the people. And the only way they could do that was through cooperation and compromise. And she said, it's not that way anymore. It's people come in, I'm going to do it my way. I'm not going to listen to you. So it's at where we are politically is reflective of where we are philosophically. Philosophically, it's you either believe when you hear someone that you respect say something, is your tendency to believe them or to not believe them? Well, depends on who you respect. It depends on who you respect.
Yeah. I'm starting to think that there was the idea in the past that there was no clear majority, and now there's this idea that there is a majority, at least in the sphere you're talking to.
Yeah.
Like I know I'm talking to this group, and they are 99% this way, as opposed to I've talked to the country, and there is no clear majority, and I don't have the opportunity to oppress because we're all unequal.
There's something I want to share with you, and I'd really like to do this together with you. I heard Chuck Todd talking today about something that's on the website of the Pew Research Center.
Yeah.
And the title is Beyond Red and Blue, the Political Topology. Mm-hmm. And they separate the topology into, instead of two, red and blue, they separate it into 9. And it goes from, sorry, can't show you this graphic, but it goes from the progressive left, which is about 6%, the establishment liberals, about 13%, the Democratic mainstays, this is about 16%, the outsider left, and in the middle, the stressed sideliners, people who don't give, don't bother. Then going further to the right, the ambivalent right, people who may go, they're undecided in many elections, the populist right, the committed conservatives, which would be your, Mitt Romneys and others, and then on the far right, the faith and flag conservatives. Now, I find it interesting that while they present this in a spectrum, and I don't know that you can see this. Probably
I can't, but I will want to look at that later.
They're showing a spectrum.
Yeah, it's a bit closer.
I think they could, what would be interesting to me is to take those segments, and I don't know if there are 9 classifications of people. There probably are, but there's also probably 57. You can stretch those numbers, and
somewhere between 9 and 330 million.
Right. But if you took those positions and instead of lining them up left to right, you did sort of a scatter diagram.
Yeah.
And then superimposed on that your feelings about, your actual actions. What do you buy? Right. Well, how you vote is one thing, but what do you buy? Where do you live? What magazines or news sources do you subscribe to? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You may find that things don't just balance left to right, that the balance is probably more in the middle, and the left and right extremes are just, those are the outliers.
They're extremes. Yeah.
Those are outliers. But once again, I once argued that if you go far enough left, you'll get to the right.
Sure.
Some libertarians who would consider themselves very, very conservative, I would actually agree with on some policies like military intervention. I agree with Rand Paul about not having so many bases overseas. I don't think it's a good idea. And we spend, we're going to spend, $5 trillion a year for the next 50 years on the military. Right. So where we position ourselves is over a broad spectrum, and it shouldn't be simply left and right, because that's, as we were saying before, that's too simplistic. You ask people to choose, are you going to be red or blue? Well, there's a lot more colors here in that. And you don't have to make that choice. You don't have to say, I am a Democrat. Now, you can vote for Democrats, but one of the things I think would be a good movement is for everybody to register independent.
Right. Well, this gets back to dogma. Like, it's very easy for us to understand dogma versus I forgot, wisdom, I guess, where it's easy to see how dogma perpetuates itself, like within a radical reactionary church. It's less easy, I've kind of noticed, for people to understand dogma of being a Democrat. This like I saw it where, and this was during the Clinton election, where nobody, and they may have had these thoughts and things that just didn't express them to me. But the only thing that I heard being expressed specifically to me was, she's a woman, she's a Democrat, and she's not Trump. And like these were the main things. Like nobody's like, oh no, you didn't know this about Hillary Clinton. Like she was going to bring forth all this and this is what I wanted, these policy things. Didn't hear that. She didn't hear the, what are the nuances of why I'm a Democrat. And people are starting to think that now, but they didn't think that even years ago. Where it's like, and I asked them, I was like, well, what is a Democrat? Why are you on? And they didn't like the question because it's really, well, my parents were. That's why. Right. I'm like, not good enough for me. But is this on the liberal side of identifying liberal dogma? One, that the Democrats are the good guys. And I don't know if that's dogma or just how groups think of themselves. We're always the good guys. I'm like, why? And like, I understand that the radical reactionary Republican is a bad guy. Doesn't make you a good guy.
Yeah,
you could both be bad guys.
Well, I mean, there should be, for instance, take the protests over George Floyd and take the January 6th insurrection. People who did damage, who threatened police officers, who were violent, should be arrested. Now, which one am I talking about? I'm talking about both of them.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, that was another thing we didn't accept.
Instead of that, we say, well, those protesters on Black Lives Matter, they should be arrested.
Right.
Well, what about the January? Well, no, I'm going to focus on your faults, and you're going to focus on my faults. We're not going to seek out the common vision, which is violence in public. Violence in politics is wrong and threatening democracy. Doesn't matter how you feel. Right now people are very cavalier in their discussion of civil war. So, well, we want to have another civil war. Do you realize what percentage of the population died in the last one?
Right.
Died not only in battle, but from all of the impacts of disease and starvation and God knows what else. So you're really saying that your beliefs are worth mass destruction and death. I mean, we're at a point where we should come to a mad mutual assured destruction like we did with nuclear weapons, that the conclusion should be, like in war games, the only way to win is not to play. You cannot do this no matter which side of the argument you're on. And we need, there should be an appeal to that.
I'd like to hear more about people talking about the American experiment, because when I start talking about, in my mind, it's more powerful when I'm talking about the American Compact. And the American Compact is, it's anti-tyrannical, it's self-rule to defeat tyranny. And self-rule is through compromise, where it was this very, and I don't know if it was specifically American, but when the history books I read, and of course they're all slanted and jaded, of, this was America's gift to the world was this idea of the American Compact, of you strive for compromise, you will get not 100% of what you want. And that's a bad thing if you do. The best compromise is when everybody walks away kind of happy and unhappy.
You were bringing up the American experiment.
Oh, right. The American, I've heard it as the American Compact, which is the number one thing is Americans they're against tyranny by being for self-rule. Self-rule is achieved through compromise. And we seem to have lost this notion altogether. Like, this should be a religious type notion in the American psyche. And, there's a lot of things that Americans are like, it's really easy to say, we're number one. And then a lot of people are like, well, no, we're actually number 32. And then it's good thrown off the rails and you kind of miss the point. And like, what is our civic beatitude? I don't know what the thing would be of, and that the number one is being anti-tyranny in any form, tyranny of corporations, tyranny of kings, tyranny of the majority, tyranny of the minority, any tyranny. any of it. And one of the only effective ways to be against tyranny is to empower as many people as possible and to expect compromise. Like you have to expect not to get it all. Right. And we've perverted this.
Compromise has to be the goal.
And compromise has to be the goal. And now compromise is not the goal. It's being the richest, most powerful, or the loudest, or the whatevers.
Yeah. And it's funny to me how on a small group level, oftentimes it's possible to have something close to true democracy where you respect minority opinions and, you know, your goal, like if you belong to an organization or a club, and you're trying to reach a decision, you don't want to get 51% of the people to shove something down the throat of 49% of the people.
Right.
You know, that's not your goal. Your goal is to get 100% agreement and be satisfied with 75%. Sure. You know, your goal is to get everybody on board with what you do. That's why, you know, there was and this becomes a long story, but I know I've told you about this before, but when I was on the parish council at Holy Trinity, right. I was part of the council for a couple of years before I got elected president of the council. And when I became president of the council, I said, I'm going to do this differently. And the first thing we're going to do is agree to support the decision of the group. And if you don't agree up front to support the decision of the group, then we'd ask you to depart from the group. That our goal is to come to agreement. And you have to understand that if you're a holdout of 1 against 12, you have to give up your position. That's it.
Right.
It's no different than in a, you know, you get a bunch of friends and they say, let's go out to eat. Where do you want? Well, I want this, I want that. Well, the objective is not, you know, I want Chinese and I don't give a shit what the rest of you people want. I don't care if you can't eat it. I'm going to get my will.
Right.
That's not, I mean, that's antithetical to being part of the group.
Right. Right.
Having the meal together is the goal.
Yeah.
You know, having something.
And I would rephrase it of, it's not finding 100% agreement. It's finding the thing 100% can agree on. It's a very subtle thing. There's one is, right. I'm going to trick you all into being, it can easily go that way. I'm going to trick you all into believing my thing versus what is the thing we believe?
Right.
Like give up some power. This is something I've learned way early on in life is you get more power by giving up power.
Yeah.
It just works that way. And it's just weird.
That's Obi-Wan.
Yeah. It's like, well, and you think of it in an interpersonal relationship, you know, eventually the person who gets their way all the time, it's not, there's a resentment that builds. But the person who's like, I can trust this person to just kind of do what's in best interest of everybody.
Yeah.
You know, then you get the trust and it builds. So it is very true of, you know, the more you give, the more you receive is the truism.
You know, it's interesting in kind of preparing for today. I just this morning opened up the book of wisdom, you know, wisdom of Solomon from the Old Testament.
Don't chop your babies in half.
That's exactly what you will read in that they're drawing a distinction between those people who disdain the righteous man because they, you know, they don't have, you go back and see it, but basically they draw the distinction that, you know, there are some people who look upon righteousness as something to be despised. And those people will basically inherit the wind, while the just person will get their reward. Now they talk about you're going to get the reward in God later or whatever. I don't know how they approach it. But drawing this distinction between the person who is seeking out their own personal gain and the person who is trying to act in the best interest of everyone, or at least try to find, as you said, something that everybody can agree upon. What's happened is the people who are manipulating the system to get what they want do not go along with that the basic notion of the American experiment, which is compromise is the goal.
Right.
And what they really mean by the American experiment is this hasn't been done before. What we're doing
Right.
in the United States is novel, and it's just over 200 years. And then, in the scope of things, that's a blink of an eye. Traditionally, the powerful prevail until they rot.
Right.
They get what they want until they're bloated and die. That's the way the world has always operated. The people with power, as they say, the golden rule, the ones with the gold rule.
Right.
But the American experiment was the antithesis of that. And it said what you were saying before, that this is the idea here. The fundamental idea is that we come together and find a compromise. Now, we have grown to, and we did a session on compromise some year ago, I guess. I remember I put together a little video on compromise. And compromise is viewed as a negative.
Failing.
Yeah. We always haul out Neville Chamberlain, who wanted to compromise with Hitler and, precipitated the war and everything. So we see compromise as a bad thing. Well, capitulation is not good, but compromise means you're holding your position and you're going to gain the essentials of your position and give up some of the accidental things. You're willing to give up to a point.
Right.
It's that argument in the middle of what am I willing to give up? What are you willing to give up? That's what you talk about. You don't argue the extremes. If you argue the extremes, you're never going to reach compromise, because I believe in abortion and you don't. Well, you have to change. No, you have to change. Well, okay, argument's over, discussion's over. Well, I believe that people shouldn't have abortions because we can make them unnecessary by providing them with other means. So I agree in principle that the idea of abortion is not a pleasant one, and it's something I hope would never occur. But, the way to do it is not by outlawing it and locking people up and making it difficult for them. The way out of it is to provide them with birth control and to lock up rapists and do all of those things. So, the ability to compromise seems always to be taken to the extreme. And so we make all of our policies in government about extremes. And someone like the Orange Menace, who left us a few months ago, someone like that wants to accentuate the extreme and will do whatever is necessary to do that. He talked about the infrastructure deal forever and ever. Oh, what a great deal this was. What we just passed in the infrastructure bill was the very thing that he was trying to get passed. But now he's against it. Why? Well, because he doesn't get any credit. He doesn't win anything out of it. So, I'm against it. If it's not good for me, what good is it? So he represented the antithesis of democracy. And yet there are a whole lot of people who support him. And that's why I've said, I kind of made up something where I said America is a nation united on a common misunderstanding. We don't know what we believe in. All men are created equal and endowed with inalienable rights. We say those things, but we disagree about what they actually mean. And historically, all men are created equally meant all white men who own property are created equal. They didn't even envision immigrants from Africa. They've held.
A quick aside. I was watching this awesome video of it was this professor, and he was talking about how the Revolutionary War was rooted in pro-slavery sentiment, where chattel slavery and mainly African slavery, but chattel slavery was phasing out in the British Empire and was becoming passé in Europe. And so they're part of the colony. We're part of the colony, and we're like, eventually this is going to go away, guys. This is really not popular anymore. And America was like, our rich white guys were like, no. And the way he did it was like, how come I was never exposed to that line of reasoning? Where it made complete sense. And it's a new theory to me, and whatever. And I didn't quite get it, but it seemed to make it had a grab to me, because it's like, oh well, the first Revolutionary War was trying to, I couldn't imagine, when I started thinking about that, it's not over a tax over tea. Like, a tax over tea caused thousands of people to kill other people. Yeah, okay. Now that I think about it, that sounds dumb. Like, that's not enough. The big thing was, we are going to dramatically change your economy and reduce your wealth because you can't own slaves. Slaves in history has been the most profitable thing ever. And when you think about money is labor. And so if I control your labor, you're getting the root of it. And empires are built on slavery. Like, it's the thing. Right. And we had our own little slave system, and they're like, yeah, people don't like, it's not really socially acceptable anymore in America. So as colony, you're gonna have to do this. And we're like, no, you're way over there. I'm rich, fuck you. And that's kind of when this guy started talking about it this way. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And it does reinforce that slavery being part of the American DNA. And it's not just the Civil War. It was we are the empire built on slaves. Like, duh. Yeah. It's like, we're just a continuation of England, and they were built on slaves, and they're just a continuation of Rome. They were built on slaves. Like, well, anyway,
go ahead.
But no, I'm rambling.
No, I in the sense of the American experiment, we, as I was saying before, people don't agree on what that is.
Yeah,
it's attractive to someone, in our heritage, our family heritage. We were not coming from the aristocracy in Europe. We were coming from common people, in wherever, Wales, Ireland. And we were looking for opportunity, and someone says all men are created equal. We go, hey, that sounds good. That's not the way it was back home. Right. People didn't give a shit about you back there. So there's the idea. And that was confronted by the reality of horrible
it's labor. The same everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same thing, but it was packaged differently, and it gave people some hope. And it got resurrected periodically in times of war and depression and so forth, where, as long as wealthy people need the poor, they're going to make accommodations. When they no longer need them, they won't do so.
Right.
And we've transcended slavery with technology. Right now, if you were raising cotton, you had to have a whole 100 slaves out in the field, pick the cotton, and all of that stuff. Now you do it by a machine. I don't need that labor.
And so now we have wage slavery. So
well, it's been at least, and this is the kind of thing that infuriates liberals when you say it, but at least the slaves were taken care of. You may have treated them cruelly, but you treated them.
Right.
You did something. You fed them. You kept them from dying.
Don't throw away your machines. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you viewed them as property, and you took care of your property.
Right.
So when they're no longer your property, you don't have to give a shit about them. Right. That's the reality that we pass through. And the folks on the left are saying, well, we need to extend this idea of democracy, this American, we need to extend the American dream and the American, experiment to everyone. And the other people are saying, no, we don't. We don't have to do that. We never intended that. That's not the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So we've come to a loggerhead here, and there is a fundamental disagreement about what the nature of the American experiment is. And
Right.
if you
It's
believe,
back to narrative. Yeah.
well,
And
but if,
narrative comes through dogma, comes through education, comes through media. And this one of the fascinating things of it's the redefining of what America is has been quite successful in one realm where America is white male trucks and guns, and that's ludicrous in and of itself. When you go out into the country, that's not the only thing. Like it's a story, and it's not untrue, but it's not true. Uh,
well,
and you if you think in that mode and you go out into the country and start treating them like you think they are, they're going to be really mad at you, and I would be too, because like, no, that's a story. There's some roots. It's like stereotyping just saves time. It's a human thing. It's like it's not all bad, but there are roots of truth, but it's not the defining truth kind of thing. But and if you think of it more of a marketing branding campaign, it's a tremendously successful, because America is me, not them. That's what it turned out to be. Yeah. And when you are in a severe lack of control and you turn towards certainty and strong men, then that just works. And so it's that lack of control. And of course, back to solutions, it's not giving them the idea, not spreading the idea of freedom, but spread the actual freedom, i.e. spread the power, i.e. spread the money. Right. If everybody had the money, they would feel more in control. They would reject extremism, because if you're not susceptible to it, it looks bad to you.
Well, how many people who hate the government sent back the checks they were sent last year?
Not me.
I hate the government, so here, I don't want your money.
No, it's like I'll take whatever you give
me. gimme.
Yeah.
So there is a real politic here that what will people actually do, and people will support. It's like with healthcare, people will support what we now call Obamacare. They will support it.
Yeah.
Why? Well, because they benefit from it. That's why. They will support Social Security. Why? Because they benefit. Medicare. Things they experience.
I like the things that enable you to challenge narratives. Like, I can go to the hospital and use that stuff because, well, I have no other choice.
But see, the problem is that we make arguments, like in the healthcare debate, we make arguments about the specific legislation that are yes or no. Yes, I want it, no, I don't. And that's the only decision somebody has to make. The thing we should do is we should articulate the very specific things that we want and don't want. We want a healthy nation. How do you have a healthy nation? Well, you provide people with the opportunity to maintain their health by consulting physicians and by getting advice regarding their diet and exercise. You do all the things that can help people to get healthy, or at least you don't stand in the way.
Right.
And
I like this idea of the you said it before, of going into the conversation, what am I willing to give up? And I expect you to also say what you're willing to give up. And if those two prerequisites can happen, then we can move to compromise. Like one of the simpler ones, I guess, like school prayer. This is one where, like, okay, what am I willing to give up? Well, the one thing is, I am not your community. I am not your teacher. I am not your school board. You should be able to say what you want in that realm. Like, just because I know the dangers of mixing politics and religion and the dangers of indoctrination, especially from religion. I know conceptually of all those dangers, but it's still not my choice. If you want God in your schools, you should be able to have God in your schools, period. And so I could be giving up this kind of control. Now, I would hope on the other side is we can have God in our schools, but we won't dictate which God, because the big fear of mine is you're dictating. And I was like, no. It's like, put God in all schools. Just put all the gods and the absence of gods and do it all. Like, have everybody, this whole militancy of, oh, they said God, or oh, this person prayed. We need to get them on a Facebook smear campaign and draw them all out and ruin their lives till they kill themselves.
Right.
No.
Well, once again, it's, what lies at the heart of what you're doing? Do you want people to be able to express their understanding of reality in an educational environment? And the answer should overwhelmingly be, of course you do. You not only want to allow it, you want to encourage it.
Encourage it, yeah.
So encourage people to talk about what they believe and why, and to share that openly without demanding anyone share your point of view.
Right.
In other words, if you have a Hindu or a Muslim in your school, you can't expect them to just go along with your Christian prayer.
Right.
So don't do that.
Right.
You do something that is, at least non-denominational. Hopefully, something that's but you can bring up religion, you can bring up your understanding of the deity, but you have to respect the fact that everybody's not going to agree with you. And
right.
That's where we have a problem in our schools, is that instead of trying to address the situations where people are being treated unfairly regarding religion, we just say, don't do anything.
Right. Yeah, that's the wrong.
Instead of educating people about politics, we keep politics away.
If our school system had fostered that type of environment, we would all know how to talk about these extreme things.
Well, yeah. But the other aspect of that, the whole educational thing gets me off onto a large tangent. I don't want to get into today, but
education is the dogma of the day.
But education should not be about any kind of indoctrination. It's we put far too much on the school. We have a problem with unwed mothers, so let's do something in school. Why does school have to do it?
Right.
What's the and the other issue is, people are going to learn about what they want to learn.
Right.
You don't have to teach anybody how to, how to use drugs, how to watch a movie, how to,
right.
There are things that people are going to learn about. The question is, do you have a forum, a community forum, where ideas are presented in an open and honest way so that people can understand different perspectives? That's the purpose of
right.
As far as I'm concerned, the purpose of having people come to school is to engage in it. If that's not the purpose, then save gasoline.
Right.
Fill the buses. Close down the buildings. You don't need that. You can get information this way. We can put it on.
But how are we going to indoctrinate people to sit in an office and give their soul away?
Well, yeah, it's conditioning. Yeah, the conditioning of sit there, and that really is that's the essential thing about it. Is the schools we have were industrial era,
and that's the dirty secret of it was intentional. It was planned to have a factory school system to promote values of factoryism, and I'm like. And it's not just some academic saying, "Oh, that's how I think it evolved." It's like, no, there were council meetings. Like, come on, guys.
Sure. Well, you had to be competitive, and you had to have a labor force that could, at least read and do minimal mathematics and
knew how to sit in a room all day and follow orders.
Well, show up on time, do what you're told.
The number one thing people every single person learns from school is the bell.
Yeah. It's either a good thing or a bad thing.
That's Pavlov on steroids, and we figured it out. And you have to work until your lunch break. And like, well, this was all kind of it was going into the narrative of the American Compact and of compromise and all these things, because I couldn't understand our original question about wisdom. Like, I'm having a real difficult time with the concept itself. And because I'm like, okay, well, what have been wise or unwise decisions in my life? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that. Like, it's hard enough for me to remember decisions in my life. And now maybe it's my MO is to not make a decision. Like, that's, well, I told you I was an abstract thinker. So
yeah, well, I think, trying to arrive at a specific definition is going to be difficult, but I would say generally that wisdom is the knowledge gained from experience in making choices.
And if you can actually extrapolate and apply, because I stop at experiential knowledge. I know what that is. I have that, but it's when, I guess a better one to ask myself is, when armed with that, did I not make the same decision twice, kind of thing? When did I not follow what is the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing, expecting
a different outcome.
When did I veer off?
Well,
and that would be a wise choice, right?
I don't think one can be born wise.
No.
I think the requirement is experience. And the issue is how you respond to that experience. That, just take the simple thing of interacting with people in public.
Right.
What do you do when you're in an elevator with a group of people? Well, it's probably not wise to start talking partisan politics.
No,
it's not a good thing to do. Why? Because I don't have a right to? No, for the same reason that you don't light up a cigarette in an elevator. It's not going to profit you. It's going to alienate other people. So you don't do it. So I think a big part of wisdom is learning what not to do. Learning when to keep your mouth shut. Learning not to do that. I had a bunch of guys over on Wednesday we just sat around the fire. There were about 7 or 8 of us, and I asked them about wisdom. I said, when you're an old fart, you're supposed to be wise. Well, are you wise? If so, why? If not, why not? What's it all about? And I think, we were coming to that conclusion. One of the things I offered as an example is I see people, other couples that Marcia and I are in communication with, and we see a distinct difference between the couples who contradict each other in public and the ones who don't. That if your spouse says something that you don't think is correct, do you say, no, it wasn't Wednesday, it was Thursday. No, you got it. No, it wasn't this, wasn't, being unpleasantly or unpleasantly correcting them over minor things that are really not essential. And the wise person in a relationship doesn't do that. You don't, what difference does it make if they got the date wrong?
Right.
Well, if it's critically important, yes, bring it up. But if it's not, don't in other words, don't argue your position when there is a relationship at stake. Don't argue your position and forsake the relation. I'm going to be right. It's what Solomon did. To be, cut that baby in half. Well, he was very wise. He understood that the mother would not allow the child to be cut in half, even if she had to give it up. She's not going to let the child be cut in half. So it's sometimes doing something that is expressive. Sometimes it's doing something that is more recessive, more holding back and not doing it.
I kind of like that approach. Is like, what's the thing I can do to bring out the best in someone else?
Yeah.
Because I'm very interested in the right answer and the correct answer. Like, all it doesn't really matter. It's what's for them, unless I want power over them or whatever, then it's a different conversation. But it's what I project might be the most satisfactory thing is to enable that person to become a better version of themselves on their terms, not my terms, their terms. So it's really just kind of feeling that out, because we were talking about like friends coming to you with big decisions, and it's kind of on the surface can be they're coming to you for wisdom, and I've never accepted that mantle. It's more of, you already know the answer. You're just trying to figure it out. It's kind of like sculpting. Like, that sculpture is there. It's just buried in stone. So let's just chip the stone away. I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm not going to determine none of this stuff. It's like, if you're coming to me with a question, it's obvious you already know the answer. You just don't know you know it. You're not comfortable with it. This is just, how do I enable you to be the person, as opposed to, I'm going to tell you what's right and wrong. I can't tell you what's right and wrong. I can tell you what makes me happy and unhappy, but no one knows anything. We're all making it up as we go along. Like,
well, sometimes it's, when somebody comes to you and they say they're seeking advice, what they're really saying is, will you listen to me so I can think this through? So I can articulate.
They're looking for permission, somehow. Either any spectrum. But
they've been talking to themselves about it. And that's not satisfactory, because all that does is raise more questions. When they talk to you about it, when you talk to another person, you're compelled to try to make sense.
Well, speak for yourself.
If you talk crazy, if you talk crazy, people will not listen to you. So you're compelled to try to make sense to the person you're speaking with. So that's what communication is, that you're using words and gestures and symbols and so forth to try to convey an idea. So they're coming to you with the notion that I need to articulate what I'm going through. I need to spell this out in a way that can make sense. That's why, the techniques of, well, you need to make a decision. Well, let's make up a chart. Let's put all the reasons why on this side and the reasons not on this side. Well, does that make a decision? No, but it lines them up for you so you can see it a little differently and come to your decision. So it's that technique. And I think there's a lot lost in the way in which we communicate, both individually and through our institutions, in the idea that I'm coming to sell an idea. I've got the idea, and I'm going to make everybody buy my idea. And that really shouldn't be the goal. We're
all going to be famous.
Well, I have an idea, and I want to see if this makes sense. I could never communicate this well to my staff when I was in charge of different operations, both in the prison and in the high school and everything. What I would tell them at the beginning of the year, or whatever meeting we had, is, I'm looking to you for ideas. If I say something and you don't think it makes sense, or if we're doing something that doesn't make sense, I count on you to tell me what you think is wrong. I never got people to buy into that. They'd always shy away. Well, I don't want to, alienate or piss off the boss or something like that. And I could never get them to understand that what I really want is for people to express their ideas, because I want to formulate mine more. I want to see these different perspectives and understand them. And that's a hard thing to,
I don't know if I got that from you, because in my best work experiences, and I would explain it to the other people of what was going on, of like, I'm going to give you this is if I had a good boss or not, they understood this. I'm going to just keep giving you ideas. Shoot them all down if you want. The purpose here is me to give you ideas. If you stop listening, I don't care if you say no to them.
Yeah.
If you stop listening to them, then we have a problem. Because my whole goal here is just to feed ideas. Just keep going until it sticks. And I think this was another art thing. And again, why I love Dune, he was talking about it where Villeneuve surrounds himself with the best in the field. They approach a problem and he expects your A game. You know, you look at him and he's not a tyrant at all. He's the opposite of a tyrant, but he expects peak performance. He's like, he's an artist and a passionate one and he expects to see passion. Right. But it's whatever they came up with, and they would bring in the ideas and they would play it around. And if it didn't work, nobody got upset. They just went and found another idea, and you keep finding ideas until it falls into place. And that's what these are high level artists, not high level like accomplishment, but high level producing, you know, and just trust the art is how that happened. And if you don't trust the art, you don't get. If you don't trust the business ethic or the strategic plan or the business identity is what you're trying to trust. Like at Heartland was when it was like, I trust this identity. We're all going to keep just going and going until it works.
Yeah. Well, the art should transcend the artist. I mean, the art should be greater than the individual who did it. It's not art. You know, it's just, you know, it's just refuse. Well, this is good today. I think we've talked around the topic of wisdom. I don't know where to go with this. I just feel like there's something about the discussion of wisdom that is non-sectarian. That's not, it's not a left, right, up, down, blue, red kind of thing. It's wisdom should be something that everybody could appreciate.
It should resonate. It should resonate.
Yeah. I don't know if it's important to rigidly define it, but
I think that's where you're going to go. Like refuse to define it, I think is the best direction. But you need to find that resonance because it's like when I started trying to get it into that, it's too big a concept. It's one of those magic words. Like love is another magic word. It just means way too many things.
Right. But like love, it's something you need to have as much of as possible. Right. Don't know what it is, but I want all of it.
Right. I'll know what it is when I see it. Right.